The dust hung thick over Red Pine Livestock Yard, catching in the late afternoon sun like smoke. Somewhere between the clang of loading gates and the auctioneer's barked rhythm, a black stallion stood dead still in the farthest pen. His ribs sharp beneath a dull, patchy coat, his eyes half-lidded but alert. He looked more like a shadow than an animal, like something stuck between here and someplace it couldn't name. Most folks gave him a wide berth. One handler muttered to another, "That's the one that tore up old man Jessup's arm. Should have been put down last week." Others nodded. Dangerous. Wild, not worth the trouble. But across the fence a boy didn't move. Cal Morgan, all of 16 and built like he'd grown more out of hardship than meals, clung to the wooden slats, like they were the only thing keeping him upright. His blonde curls were wind-tangled, his jeans streaked with old dirt, and his eyes, steady, unblinking, were locked onto the stallion. He didn't see fury, he saw a question, maybe even a plea. "Cal!" His grandfather's voice rang out from the edge of the yard, sharp as boot leather. "Get away from that damn pen." Cal didn't move. "He's not mean," he called without turning. "He's not your problem either," Hank Morgan replied, standing beside the battered old Ford that had seen better decades. "You ain't your daddy. You don't need to carry his ghosts." Cal's grip on the fence tightened. The stallion flicked an ear. Inside the auction barn, the bidding moved quick. Cattle, goats, sheep, sold off like old tools. Cal heard the auctioneer's tone shift, heard the way it flattened as they prepared the last lot. The black stallion. 2 handlers led him in under double ropes and side glances. The animal didn't buck or rear, just moved like coiled wire, every muscle taut, head low, eyes flickering like he was somewhere else entirely. "No papers," the auctioneer called. "No name. Final chance before the kill truck. Starting bid, $50. Silence. A few folks shifted. One woman whispered something and shook her head. "Do I hear 50? The stallion exhaled, loud and slow, like he was already gone. "50, Cal said. The word wasn't loud, but it cut the silence clean. Heads turned. Hank froze beside the truck, jaw clenched. "Boy, what the hell?" "We got 50, the auctioneer called, surprised. "Do I hear 60? Silence again, going once, twice. Sold. The gavel cracked. One of the handlers smirked as he shoved the lead rope toward Cal. "You're either the bravest kid I've met or the dumbest." Cal took the rope with both hands. His knuckles turned white as the stallion snorted, nostrils flaring wide. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he whispered. "You've had enough of that." Behind him, a sharp voice broke the quiet. "Well, I'll be damned. That's my horse, kid." Cal turned slowly. A man in a tan jacket and black Stetson stepped forward, boots thudding on the dirt. His face was all hard edges and expensive leather, and his eyes, blue and cold as pond ice, landed on Cal like a weight. "Name's Doyle Strickland," he said, thumbing the brim of his hat. "I was going to scoop that stallion up for a little business arrangement. Guess you beat me to it." Cal swallowed. "You didn't bid?" Doyle smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Didn't need to. Some of us know how to settle things off the record." Hank stepped between them, arms crossed. "He's paid, fair and square." Strickland gave him a long look, then leaned slightly toward Cal. "You think you're saving that horse?" "Trust me, son. He'll rip you open before he ever thanks you. And when that day comes, don't go crying for help. You took him from me. I don't forget things like that." Then he turned and walked away, dust swirling around his boots like smoke trailing a fire. Hank didn't say a word as Cal led the stallion, slowly, painfully, toward their trailer. It took almost an hour, no force, no shouting, just the boy's calm breath and the soft drag of worn boots in the dirt. Every time the stallion hesitated, Cal waited. Every time the lead rope went taut, he stepped back. It was less a battle than a conversation, and slowly the horse followed. By the time they shut the trailer gate, the sun had dropped behind the ridge. The world was dipped in copper light, and Cal's shirt clung to his back with sweat. Hank finally spoke. "You got a name for him?" Cal looked through the slats of the trailer where the stallion stood, still as shadow. "Not yet," he said. "I think he'll tell me when he's ready." Hank grunted. But there was something else behind the sound. Something that didn't sound quite like disapproval. They didn't speak again on the drive home. The only sound was the hum of tires on gravel and the stallion's occasional shift in the trailer behind them. Back at the ranch, Cal opened the gate slow. The barn was still full of dust and silence from a life that had emptied out when his father died. But tonight, something stood in its place. Something breathing. He led the stallion into the last stall. Once his dad's favorite roping horse had lived there, and unlatched the rope. The horse didn't bolt. He stood in the corner, half in shadow, half in moonlight. Cal leaned on the opposite wall, arms crossed, breathing deep through the dust. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched. Then he whispered, "You're not broken. You're just waiting for someone not to give up." The stallion didn't answer, but he didn't turn away either. The barn at the edge of the Morgan property had stood through blizzards, droughts, and 3 generations of stubborn men. But nothing in its timbered bones was ready for what now lived in stall number 5. Ghost didn't eat while Cal watched. He didn't sleep. He paced when the wind shifted and kicked at the stall walls when coyotes howled in the distance. If someone so much as rattled a feed bucket too close, he recoiled like he'd been burned. 3 days in, Cal hadn't laid a hand on him. Most people would have quit, but Cal just kept showing up. Each morning before dawn, he brought a bucket of oats, a flake of hay, and his father's old toolbox. Not for training gear, he didn't believe in whips or restraints. Just nails, a hammer, and broken planks he pulled from the pile behind the shed. He rebuilt the stall slowly, using pieces salvaged from the one his father had built years ago. It was something quiet and steady. Like every board he patched was another piece of himself being nailed back together. Hank watched from a distance, sometimes from the porch with a mug of black coffee, sometimes from the barn doors, arms folded. He never said much, just grunted, or muttered, "That damn horse is going to eat him alive?" Cal didn't argue. He just kept showing up. That week, Dr. Laurel Brinley rolled into the yard in her rusted green Jeep. She wore denim overalls, cracked boots, and an expression like she'd seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Ghost snorted when she approached. His muscles bunched, eyes wide, tail flicking like a warning flag. "Stay back," Cal said quietly. "He doesn't like strangers." Dr. Brinley stopped 10 feet short of the stall. "That's not just fear," she murmured, narrowing her eyes. "That's trauma and rage." She crouched slowly, tilting her head as she studied him. Ghost's flank twitched, but he didn't bolt. "There's a scar on his shoulder," she said after a beat. "Low left, looks deep. Mind if I take a closer look?" Cal hesitated, then nodded. "If he lets you—" She moved slow. No sudden shifts, no reaching hands. She sat cross-legged in the straw and began humming, some old cowboy lullaby no one had sung in years. After a long while, Ghost inched forward, just enough to let her brush her fingers across the scar. "Well, I'll be," she whispered. "There's a microchip under this one. He was owned before." She pulled out her scanner from her bag and beeped the chip. The name flashed across the screen. Midnight Prophet. Once registered to a racing stable in Colorado, marked as sold after a leg injury. "Looks like your boy was bred for speed," she said. "Thrown out after he broke down. Happens more than people like to admit." Cal stared at the name, Midnight Prophet. It didn't fit anymore, but the story did. "Someone gave up on him," he said softly. Dr. Brindley looked over. More like tossed him aside. She gave Ghost a wide berth as she left the stall. "He's going to take time, maybe more than you've got. You sure about this?" Cal didn't look at her when he answered. "I'm not giving up on him." She left behind antibiotics and a stack of warnings, but no judgment. That night, Cal sat on the edge of the loft with his sketchbook open. His drawings weren't good, but they were honest. Charcoal smudges of Ghost's wide eyes, his jagged posture, the way his ears never seemed to settle. He didn't show them to anyone. They were for him. Proof they were trying. The next morning, Hank brought news with his coffee. Vet dropped by town hall, said they got a call from out by Miller's Mill, abandoned filly, maybe a year old, half-starved. Can't take another horse with this place the way it is. Cal's heart kicked. "Can I see her?" Hank scowled. "Number. You've already got your hands full." Cal said nothing, but the weight in his chest settled deep. Another one, just like Ghost, left behind because someone couldn't be bothered. He thought about it the rest of the day. That evening, he sat outside Ghost's stall, not saying much, just breathing. The horse had begun eating if Cal stayed silent enough. He even lay down once, though he popped up fast when the barn creaked. Cal reached into his pocket and pulled out an old dog toy, his childhood mutt's favorite rope. The dog, Daisy, had been skittish too. It had taken 6 months before she let anyone touch her without flinching. He set the toy gently on the straw beside him, an offering to the space between. "I get it," Cal said softly. "Being scared doesn't mean you're dangerous, just means you remember." Ghost didn't move, but his ears tilted forward, listening. The next day, Juniper arrived. Dr. Brindley didn't ask permission, just showed up with the filly in a borrowed trailer, skinny and red-eyed, one hind leg dragging from an old untreated wound. "She's not wild," she explained, "but she's gone through hell, tried to bite a cop, won't let anyone near her." Cal stared at her. She was trembling, flinching at every movement, but in her eyes was that same flicker, that same quiet fire Ghost had. Hank stood by the barn, arms crossed again. "We're not a rescue center." Cal didn't argue, but Ghost did. When they brought Juniper near the barn, she thrashed, reared, kicked against the trailer wall. Brindley moved back, shaking her head. "I don't think she's gonna unload." Ghost, hearing the chaos, stepped out into the yard. No halter, no rope. He stood at the edge of the trailer and let out a low nicker. The filly froze. Cal watched as Juniper slowly stopped shaking. Her ears pricked. Her eyes flicked toward the sound. And then, against every instinct, she stepped out. Ghost didn't move. She came forward, shaky but steady, until she stood beside him. Not touching, just present. Everyone stood silent. "You gotta be kidding me," Brindley murmured. Hank said nothing, but his brow twitched in a way that might have meant surprise, or something close to pride. That night, Cal sat between the two stalls, sketchbook open again. He drew them both this time, Ghost, tall and watchful. Juniper, small and frayed, but still standing. And on the bottom of the page, in small, scratchy handwriting, he wrote, "He didn't come closer, but he didn't turn away." That was enough. The frost came early to Red Pine that year. Mornings began with fog hovering just above the fields, and the breath of horses curled visibly in the crisp air like ghost smoke. Cal zipped his jacket to his throat and tugged his gloves on tight before stepping into the barn. Ghost stood in the stall, calm but alert. Not exactly relaxed, but no longer wired for flight. When Cal unlatched the gate and stepped inside, Ghost didn't retreat like he used to. He watched, waited. Cal moved slow, brushing dried hay from the stall floor and humming under his breath. The saddle rested nearby, not in use yet but present. Every day a little closer, every day a little trust. That morning, after laying out the feed and checking Juniper's leg bandage, Cal clicked the halter onto Ghost's head and led him out into the pasture. It was the first time Ghost walked without tension in his shoulders. The sun was still breaking over the ridge, warming the earth in gold when Cal reached the edge of the field and let the rope go slack. "You don't have to go far," he whispered. Ghost looked out over the dew-covered grass and took a hesitant step forward, then another. No rush, no panic. When his hooves touched open space, something shifted. Not a leap, not a gallop, but an ease in his frame, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to not brace for pain. Cal didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just whispered, "Good." Later that week, Cal brought out the saddle blanket. He didn't throw it over Ghost's back. He laid it in the grass and sat beside it, letting Ghost come to it in his own time. It took 40 minutes, but eventually Ghost sniffed it, flinched, then stood still when Cal picked it up and draped it gently across his back. They did that 4 days in a row. Then the saddle. It was light, untightened. Cal didn't climb on. He didn't even pretend to. He just let Ghost carry the weight. It was trust. And it was growing. That evening, Hank found Cal leaning against the fence, watching Ghost and Juniper move together across the pasture. The filly had stopped running from shadows. She followed Ghost everywhere now, never far from his side. "You saddle him yet?" Hank asked. "Yeah," Cal replied. Today was the second time. He didn't even twitch. Hank nodded, picking at a hangnail. "Never thought I'd say it, but that horse, he's turning into something." Cal tilted his head, studying Ghost. He always was. People just didn't wait long enough to see it. A long silence passed. Hank sighed. "You're your father's boy, that's for damn sure." Cal glanced over. It was the first time Hank had said that without bitterness. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, Uncle Ed showed up. He pulled into the driveway in a polished black SUV that didn't belong in Red Pine. His shirt was crisp, his handshake too firm. He didn't step out to smell the air or look at the horses. He went straight to the porch, pulled Hank aside, and began talking money. Cal watched from the barn. He couldn't hear it all, but he caught enough. "Property taxes are late. Banks circling. We need to sell. You've got nothing here but broken things." When Hank didn't answer, Ed leaned in and said something low, sharp, and cruel. That night, Cal stood by Ghost's stall, fists clenched. "They want to sell the ranch," he muttered. "Wipe it clean like none of this matters." Ghost didn't react, but Juniper came closer, resting her muzzle on the bars between them. "I won't let it happen," Cal said. "Not after what we've built." The next morning, Cal woke early and slipped outside with a mission. He brushed Ghost down, ran his hands over the stallion's shoulders, and checked every strap on the saddle before lifting it into place. Ghost flinched, but didn't move. Cal didn't mount. Not yet. Instead, he walked Ghost around the paddock, reins loose, letting the rhythm settle between them. It felt right. The week after that, he introduced the bridle. Ghost resisted at first, head tossing, ears pinned, but Cal never yanked, never forced. He waited, and Ghost relented. The real test came quietly. No one watched. No one waited with cameras or cheers. Just Cal and Ghost in the early dawn, frost melting under hooves, and the saddle already cinched. Cal took one breath, slid one boot into the stirrup, and slowly swung up. Ghost tensed, but didn't explode. They stood like that, boy and horse, in perfect stillness. Cal didn't ask him to move. He didn't push. He just sat, heart pounding, one hand resting on Ghost's shoulder. "I don't need you to be perfect," he whispered. "Just here." 5 minutes passed before he dismounted, eyes wet, legs shaky. He didn't write it in the notebook until the next day. When he did, it read simply, "First ride. We didn't go far, but we went together." Later that night, Hank stood beside him at the fence again, watching the horses. "You ever think," Hank said, "that horse is healing you just as much as you're healing him?" Cal looked down at the notebook in his hand. Then back at Ghost and Juniper under the oak tree, their shadows overlapping in the amber light. "I don't know," he said, "but I think maybe we're saving each other." The storm rolled in just after dusk, carried by wind that slammed shutters and twisted trees like ribbon. Lightning flared over red pine, painting the sky in silver cracks. Cal was already in the barn when the worst of it hit, checking on Ghost and Juniper, calming them with whispered words and steady hands. He never heard the creak of the beam overhead until it was too late. The wind hit the old roof hard. Something groaned, splintered. A support post gave way, and before Cal could move, a heavy crossbeam crashed down, pinning his leg beneath it. The pain hit sharp and deep. He gasped, teeth clenched, his cry drowned out by the pounding rain. Ghost reared in his stall, eyes wide. Juniper screamed, a high, panicked whinny that pierced through the barn like a siren. She bucked, her hooves slamming the stall door until the latch popped free. She bolted out into the storm, her small form swallowed by wind and water. But she didn't run far. She turned, cried out again, this time not in panic but in alarm. Ghost answered. With strength that hadn't come from training but instinct, he shoved at the stall gate until the old latch groaned and gave. He stepped into the aisle, his body low, steady despite the thunder. He moved to Cal slowly, deliberately. He sniffed the air, then the boy, lowering his head beside the fallen beam. Cal reached up, hand trembling, and touched his muzzle. "Help," he whispered. "Go get help." Ghost stood for a moment, then turned and galloped into the storm. Out on the road, Hank had just parked his truck and was cursing the wind when he saw the blur of black come flying out of the dark. Ghost, no halter, no rope, just soaked through and frantic. He charged right up to Hank, then spun, trotting a few yards away before looking back. "What the hell?" Hank muttered. The horse whinnied again, backing up, leading, and Hank understood. He jumped into the truck and floored it, tires sliding through the mud. 10 minutes later, with the help of neighbors and Sheriff Jensen, who'd been called by radio, they lifted the beam and pulled Cal free, his leg broken but otherwise okay. Cal faded in and out on the ride to the clinic, but he remembered one thing clearly: Juniper's cries in the storm, and Ghost standing over him like a soldier. The next morning, pain dulled by meds, Cal woke in the small-town clinic to see Dr. Brinley sitting beside him. "Horse saved your life," she said. Both of them, really. He tried to smile, but it was tight. "They're okay?" "Ghost's a little banged up. Juniper's skittish, but nothing broken. You've got a clean break, 6 weeks minimum." Cal's chest sank. 6 weeks? Dr. Brinley raised an eyebrow. "It's not forever." But there was no peace waiting outside. When Cal returned home in a cast and crutches, a black pickup truck was already parked in the driveway. Doyle Strickland stood leaning against it, flipping through a folder. His smirk was cold. "Well, now, you made the news, kid." He held up a printed article. grainy photo of Ghost under the headline, "Broken Stallion Saves Local Teen in Storm." "You know what I see?" Doyle continued. "I see opportunity. That horse has value now. And turns out—" He tapped the folder. "I've got paperwork. Bill of sale from the original auction house. That stallion was mine, whether or not you got a little ahead of yourself." Hank stepped forward. "That paper's trash. You left him to die." "Can you prove that?" Doyle shot back. "Can he?" Cal pulled out his notebook, the one with every moment, every detail, since the day he bought Ghost. And then, from his coat pocket, he handed Dr. Brinley the chip scan report. "Midnight Prophet," she confirmed. "Sold to Doyle Strickland, then abandoned. No vet records, no boarding, no transfer logs. Under Wyoming law, that horse was neglected and unclaimed. Cal's had him over 2 months. That's ownership by rescue." Doyle's mouth twitched. "You'll regret this." Sheriff Jensen, arms crossed beside his cruiser, stepped forward. "Not today he won't." Doyle left with tires spinning mud across the driveway. But the storm didn't end there. 2 days later, a blog post made its rounds across social media. Anonymous, unsigned, but biting. Red Pine teen fakes redemption story to get viral fame. It accused Cal of orchestrating the rescue, of staging the storm, of manipulating people with a convenient sob story. No name, no source, just enough venom to cause whispers at the feed store, at school, even among neighbors. Cal shut down. He barely spoke, barely left his room. Until one afternoon, sitting in the barn with Ghost dozing nearby, Juniper curled against the back wall, he opened the journal again. He turned the pages, sketched quietly, and stared at the letter he hadn't answered, folded in the pocket of his coat. The one from the University of Montana. They still wanted him to speak. Cal looked up at Ghost. "What if they're right?" he whispered. "What if I'm not the kid they think I am?" Ghost lifted his head slowly. He didn't move, just stared. And then, quietly, walked over. He pressed his muzzle against Cal's chest. Not a nudge, not a push, just a reminder. "I didn't save you," Cal said, voice cracking. "You saved me." The next morning, he picked up a pencil, opened the journal, and wrote, "When people stop believing you, prove it by what you keep showing up for." Spring and Red Pine came in quietly, like someone tiptoeing into a room they weren't sure they belonged in. The wind no longer carried ice, just the hum of new life, grass thickening, birds returning, and the soft splash of thawed creeks threading through the valley. At the Morgan Ranch, the fence posts had been repainted, the barn roof repaired, and a new nameplate hung above stall number 5, Ghost, carved in pine with care. Cal walked with a slight limp now. The cast had come off weeks ago, but the bone was still mending. Still, he moved easier, like the heaviness that used to hang from his shoulders had shifted somewhere else. Most days began with a quiet check-in. Juniper was the first to greet him, her bright chestnut coat shining with health and hard-earned trust. She trotted over the moment she saw him, nuzzling his pocket for carrots, flicking her ears at the gate with that signature sass. Ghost stood farther out, near the old oak tree. He didn't bolt when Cal approached any more, didn't stiffen when touched. He came when called now, not out of obedience, but something stronger, a choice. That morning, Cal carried a weathered wooden sign he'd worked on for weeks, letters burned in by hand, each one etched with care, not broken, just waiting to be seen. He mounted it above the paddock gate with Hank's help. The old man handed him a drill without a word, then stood back, arms crossed. When the last screw went in, he nodded once. Quiet approval that meant more than any speech could. "I got a call last night," Hank said finally. Cal glanced over. wiping sawdust from his sleeve. Yeah? University called again. Said they'd be in town for the weekend. They're still hoping you'll come speak. Cal looked away. I'm not a speaker, Grandpa. Maybe not, but you've got something worth saying. He didn't answer. Not then. That afternoon, Cal sat in the hayloft with his journal open, drawing Ghost and Juniper under the oak tree. Not perfect, but real, like everything they'd lived through. Below the sketch, he scribbled the words, "We didn't find peace. We built it." A knock on the barn door startled him. Dr. Brinley stepped inside, wiping her boots on the mat. "Thought I'd find you here, heard from a friend you might be speaking tomorrow." "Still thinking about it," he muttered. She tilted her head. "You know, there's a boy I want you to meet. His name's Mason, 10 years old, quiet, doesn't talk much. Just lost his older brother in an accident. Kid hasn't said a full sentence in 3 months. Cal frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" Dr. Brinley smiled gently. "I told his mom to bring him here." An hour later, Mason arrived. He didn't say a word when he got out of the truck. Just looked around with wide, wary eyes. His mother trailed behind, wringing her hands. Cal met them near the fence. "You want to see something?" Mason gave the smallest nod. Cal led him to Juniper first. The filly stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the boy's hand. Mason didn't flinch. He didn't reach either, just watched, breathing slow. Then Cal brought him to Ghost. The stallion towered over them, silent and still. But when Cal placed Mason's hand on his side, Ghost didn't move. Just stood there, steady and warm. Mason stared up at him, then looked at Cal. "What's his name?" he whispered. It was the first word his mother had heard him speak in months. Cal crouched beside him, smiling softly. "Ghost, but he's not scary. He just needed someone to stay." The next morning, Cal stood outside the community center where the university panel was gathering. His palms were sweaty. He could feel the crowd murmuring inside, see flashes of suits and notepads and polished smiles. He wasn't ready for that. Instead, he stepped around back, where Mason and his mom waited near the old picnic tables. Cal sat down beside the boy, pulled out his journal, and flipped to the sketch of Ghost and Juniper under the tree. "I drew this the day after the storm," he said. "Didn't think I'd show it to anyone." Mason leaned in, studying the lines. Cal handed him the journal and a pencil. "Want to add to it?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. They sat in silence, heads bowed over the page. No stage, no microphones. Just two people who knew what it felt like to be unheard, and two horses waiting by the fence line, watching without expectation. Later that week, word spread not of a grand speech or viral video, but of a boy who let another boy find his voice beside a horse. People came, not tourists, not journalists, kids, parents, folks from neighboring counties, bringing horses like Ghost, like Juniper, scarred, abandoned, too wild for other barns. The Morgans didn't turn them away. They built a small paddock on the south side of the property, called it the Listening Place. No rides, no ribbons, just space. One evening, as Cal was closing the gate, a pickup rolled into the drive. A girl stepped out, no older than 9, her boots 2 sizes too big. She held the lead rope of a thin, shivering colt. "Someone told me there was a boy here who listens to horses," she said. "Can you help him?" Cal didn't answer right away. He just opened the gate. Ghost stepped forward, his breath rising into the cool air like fog. Cal smiled and said softly, "Yeah, I think we can." And beneath the quiet sky of red pine, where wind brushed the grass like a whisper, the circle widened once more. Trust wasn't something you earned once and kept forever. It was something you gave over and over until one day it came back. one heartbeat at a time.